All right, we need to get going. You want to grab your stuff, grab a seat, grab a snack. We're in chapter 17 tonight. I know, or bullhorn, or one of them air horn things, or hook up a bunch of electroshock to, yeah, exactly, something. Hey, if y'all don't want to go home, neither do I. It's fine. I've got 8 chapters to get through tonight, so whatever you want to do. Notes are in the back. If you didn't see them, you want some, you're welcome to them. We're going to jump right in. Appreciate Isaac taking the last couple of weeks. So we're going to go. So we're in chapter 17. It's everybody's favorite chapter of 1 Samuel. It's a story that everybody knows. Even if you didn't grow up in church, you are familiar with the story, David and Goliath. I'm going to say this, and this is going to be hard to believe. The Holy Spirit did not put this story in the Bible to refer to the underdog football team. I know it's hard to believe. Isaac, does it bother you as much as it does me when you hear stuff like that? It really bugs me. Yeah. It's like, yeah, that's what we've come to. So anyway, so we're going to dive right in. We're going to go through just chapter 17 tonight. Originally, I was going to go a little bit further than that, but I got a lot of stuff I want to go through here because there's a lot to unpack in this chapter. There's also a lot of things to undo. There's a lot of bad ideas out there. I know you're shocked to hear that, but because we are not students of the Scriptures, especially the Old Testament in the Western church today, especially the modern charismatic movement, it's like we have these ideas, and these ideas just take hold, and then they get repeated, and they're not accurate. And so I just want to be as thorough as possible, and that's why we will be out of here somewhere around 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. So let's go. Chapter 1. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Azekah and Ephes Damim. Now, why do you think it gives us all of this information? Because it's a lot. What? Lynette, you mouthed words. But why does that matter? Well, I just mean in the Scriptures. Why is the Scriptures documenting the specifics of the location? Well, I mean, it's a historical narrative. And I think sometimes when we're reading these things, that's true. It's because the Holy Ghost told them to. Yeah, that's exactly right. But it gives some credence to it, because how many times have we heard a story about like, well, this town never existed, and then they later dig it up, or something to that effect. And this is an example of this right here. Now, right where this is Soko, there's Azekah. The Philistine line goes somewhere right in here. So it's kind of right in between. This is 14 miles from Bethlehem. So it's very close. Remember, David was in Bethlehem, so it's about a day's journey for David to get there. So it's not very far. In Soko or Shoko or however you say it, they have found a lot of jars and handles that in the neighborhoods there, and it had the name of the town on it. So that's how they know. So it gives them the ability to really dive in and see what's happening there. Verse 2, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with the valley between them. So just picture that, if you will, where you've got one group on one side, one group on another. There's this valley in between them. The valley of Elah means either oak or terebinth tree. So very likely this was the tree that was in that region. And so this is how you often see these battles at this time take place. They would camp out. They could see one another, but they wouldn't necessarily attack one another. And what we're going into is what's called a champion's battle. This is what we're getting ready to talk about. So in verse 4, it says, a champion went out from the camp of the Philistine named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, that's tall. Based on the measurement of a cubit, it is somewhere around that 9-foot mark. I think the Septuagint has him around 6 foot. Do you remember that off the top of your head? So it's debated how tall he was. 6 foot to a Jewish man at this time, that's pretty dang tall. Okay? But it could be upwards of 9 feet. And given the weight of the armor itself would tend to make me believe he's on the bigger side. Okay? But we'll get into that later. So we don't know a ton about Goliath. We know a little bit about Goliath. But one of the things that I found interesting is there's a document that was found called the Papyrus Anastasia I. Okay? This is it. Would somebody like to read this? Would you read this for us? No? Oh, okay. Here's what it says. Now, this is just a document that was kind of going around, but it's got some interesting information in it. This is one of the lines from this document. It says, the narrow pass, or Runa Pass, is dangerous, having Shasu Bedouin concealed beneath the bushes, some of whom are of 4 cubits or 5 cubits from their nose to foot and have fierce faces. They are unfriendly and do not take to cajolery. I don't know if I said that right. While you are alone, having no aid with you nor soldiery backing you up, you find no scout to prepare a safe passage for you. So when it talks about being 4 or 5 cubits from foot to nose, means you have a span going up above them. This is talking about these people being 7 to 9 feet tall. So this is another document that would show that the height of them is at least plausible. So I know there's a lot of haters and want to take the weirdness out of the Bible. Good luck. Okay? Now, verse 5. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had a bronze armor on his legs and bronze javelins between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. So there's a lot that I want to unpack here. First of all, this armor, you're going to notice, is all brass. Or bronze, all bronze, except for the spearhead. This was probably what was called a scaled armor. I've got a couple of pictures in your notes for you. It would look something like this. Now, I don't know how original this is. I know this is not original. That also is not going to fit a 9-foot man. Okay? But it was a coat of mail. And so it composed of all of these scales, and it was 125 pounds. The javelin, the head of it, weighed 15 pounds. So imagine taking a bowling ball and being able to hurl that any distance. Could a 6-foot man do it? The right 6-foot man, maybe, but it would be very odd. His sword, his scimitar is what it was called, was likely that heavy curved one that you see in like Aladdin and stuff like that, something along those lines. But all of the weapons were made of bronze, but the spear point was made of iron. And so you have a shield, which was likely the standing shield, had been bigger than the large round ones that you typically see. The reason I'm pointing out the fact that these were all scaled armor is because when you look at this, the word for bronze is the Hebrew word, I'm going to butcher this, nachshat, N-A-C-H-S-H-A-T, which is very similar to the Hebrew word nakash, N-A-C-H-A-S-H, which refers to serpent. So in other words, the scales of this would be somewhat serpent-like. It would make him look like, kind of like a serpent. It was talking about these scaled armor. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So it was these armor of scales. Excuse me. So when it talks about this here, it's, did I put the words in? I think I did. Here's one of them. Again, you can pronounce it. Can you read that one? What's it say? I have the English translation there. It's just, well, that was better than I could do. But it literally means armor of scales. And so it was the same root that was used in the Old Testament for snake scales, for reptile scales, or some sort of a sea creature scales. It's the same root word. And so the writer simply wanted to just show, well, he was wearing armor. He could have used words for that. They're a lot easier words to use. But instead, he chooses something that makes it seem as a man covered in scales. So this is where the imagery comes in. Because as we talk about the bronze serpent, and the bronze in the Bible is repeatedly associated with judgment. Think about the bronze serpent that Moses lifted up in Numbers 21. The tabernacle was an altar of judgment, and it was all made of bronze. So there's a lot of things that are going on. Goliath is described almost entirely in bronze. Bronze helmet, armor, greaves. The only thing that wasn't was the head of his javelin. So he's like a shining serpent in the sun. Well, think about this for a moment. In Genesis 3, what did it tell us? It creates this idea of a seed war. Now, this is stuff that I'm just kind of pointing out. This is not like, thus saith the Lord, or anything like that. But it is interesting, because you have the Messiah figure who will crush the head of the serpent. So you have all of these ideas going on. We also know that Goliath would have ultimately been a product from some form of the angels in Genesis chapter 6. How that all worked, I do not know, but that's essentially what it was. So it's giving you this idea of Edenic language, a scaled bronze head-raising enemy who defies the people of God. The first serpent, the Nakash, Lucifer, he did that in the garden. Here we have it once again. Now, another thing that often gets misunderstood is the idea that Goliath had a shield carrier. This is known as an armor bearer. Armor bearers were very common. It just literally means, the Hebrew word is Nosekelim, N-O-S-E-K-E-L-I-M. Again, I may not be pronouncing these right. It means the one who carries the weapons. And what they would typically carry were the heaviest piece, the large shields or something like that, extra spears or swords or whatever. The armor bearer was a man who was chosen. He wasn't somebody who was just assigned. So he was hand-selected. So we saw in 1 Samuel, or you'll see in 1 Samuel 31, Saul says to his armor bearer, "Draw thy sword and thrust me through." In other words, he's getting ready to die. He wants him to kill him. The servant, who is very loyal, refuses, and when he sees him dead, he falls on his own sword. So he's going to kill himself. He would not do it. And so it was not uncommon, especially at that time, that ancient kings were tortured and mutilated and all of that. Armor bearers were not only for the kings, but they were assigned to champions, commanders, and elite warriors. So most of them had it. Now, some people will try to make way too much out of this stuff, but the bottom line, this was very common. Jonathan had one. David was one to Samuel. Although at this point, he's not much of one, but that does come into play here momentarily. At least I think so. So, when you see these, it allows for you to understand what's happening there, because this is common. A armor bearer would fight alongside and protect it. Think of tag team wrestling. Exactly like that, right? When somebody's going to do a suplex, you tag them in, and they come in there and put you in the figure 4. Nobody? Okay. Derek in the back approves. All right, fine. So, anyway, this comes into the question because we know what's about to happen. David is going to face Goliath, and he's ultimately going to get permission from the king. Well, why is the king even listening to a shepherd boy? Well, he's already garnered the affection of Saul's heart. So he's part of Saul's royal household, even though he's going back and forth. He's appointed as an armor bearer. He's ultimately going to be trained around warriors, and he's familiar with the military operations because, as you're going to see, he's been going back and forth and checking things out. And so it gives him access to King Saul, which is going to matter here in a moment. Now let's go on. Then he stood and cried out with the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And you, the servants of Saul, choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." Now, this is what I was telling you. This is called a champion's battle. This is not uncommon, okay? They would a lot of times send out champions from each side, and those two would fight. And then ultimately, the representative of that army, the prevailing army would win. It would depend on what things happen. But ultimately, remember, what's going on here is this is a spiritual battle. Now, one of the things I want to show you here, just kind of expanding upon this, comes from what the Targum of Jonathan. Okay? So a Targum is just an Aramaic kind of translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, and a lot of times commentaries on it. But this is what he says on 1 Samuel 17. He says, "I am Goliath the Philistine of Gath, who killed the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas the priest, and led into captivity the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah and placed it in the temple of Dagon, my God, and it remained in the cities of the Philistines. Now, I'm not saying that is exactly what happened, okay? Because this would be a paraphrase of the Scriptures. And Scriptures don't tell us that that happened. But it's at least possible. There's nothing that would prevent it from happening. So as he comes out, what's he doing? I'm defying the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight. So when he's defying the armies of Israel, who else is he defying? He's defying God. He's defying whatever that nation is and that nation's God or gods. In this case, they are not pluralistic. So this is how the battles went. If you go through all of the Old Testament, you will see this idea of the battle of the gods time and time and time again. Now, this is where it starts getting funny. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. You notice it puts Saul in there as well. It specifically names him. Because if anybody should be brave, it should be the king. And the king was supposed to be a mighty warrior, in this case, because I think the author of the text, which was Samuel, is trying to display some of Saul's weakness and maybe even his incompetence. Because the people sought a king to lead their armies into battle. And here he is hiding from this one. So, not exactly doing his job. We see this in 1 Samuel 8, verse 19. It says, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They said, no, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. That is why they rejected God, is to get a king to go out before them and do what? Fight their battles. Who had been fighting their battles? God had been fighting their battles, but they didn't think that was good enough, so they needed a king. And now they're standing up against a giant, and where's the king? He's waiting on the shepherd boy. So this is what makes it funny. This is exactly what they wanted. They got what they wanted, and now he's not doing it. I don't know, maybe you just stick with God. Call me crazy. Verse 12. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, who had 8 sons, and the man was old, advanced in years, in the days of Saul. Now the reason it's telling you Bethlehem, Judah, is because there's also a Bethlehem, Zebulun, which is up north. So it's just making a distinction between the two. Verse 13. The 3 oldest sons had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went into the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul, but David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. So he's serving Saul, then he goes home, he takes care of the sheep, and then he goes back. This is the pattern. So we always picture David off just sitting out there in the pasture with the sheep. All of a sudden, Dad sends him on an errand, and then he goes out to the battle. He was constantly going back and forth. Why? Because he was serving Saul. And if you're an armor bearer and the king is hiding in his tent, what do you have to do? Not a whole lot. And your dad's getting pretty old, so you might need to go help him out. Verse 16, and the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. And Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of the 1,000, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. It seems to imply there might have been some fighting that was going on. Okay? I don't know for sure, but the bottom line is what was David going back to do? Deliver supplies. Bringing in the cheese. Bringing in the cheese. We will go rejoicing, bringing in the cheese. Sorry, that's the squirrels again. Now, when it says it, this is another thing that often, this is a translation issue. It says, bring back news of them. Okay? When the King James, do you have the King James there by chance? Will you read that verse 18, real loud? Take their pledge. That's a big difference. So what is this talking about? Well, because of the English translation, this bringing back assurance seems to imply checking on your brothers and make sure they're doing okay. And while that is possible, really more than likely is an indication of bringing something back, that David fulfilled his mission and the obligation of the family to bring supplies to the army. It was proof that Jesse had met his obligation to supply the army. All the families of Israel had to supply food and other things, and each one had a certain portion that they had to do. Remember when he said to the kings, when the kings come, you'll have to bring and do certain things? This is part of that obligation. And so in Akkadian, you'll find different things where a pledge was often a clay tablet, and it'd be sent with a messenger. And it was kind of proof, like getting a receipt. When you go and pay your property taxes and they give you a receipt, if they ever try to come back and say, you didn't pay it, no, here's my proof. This is more than likely what it's talking about. It's not so much wondering how your brothers are doing, it's bringing back the pledge that we fulfilled our obligation to help support the military. So David arose early in the morning. He left the sheep with the keeper and took the things and went to as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper. He ran into the army and came and greeted his brothers. So, the keeper of the supplies marks the fulfillment of the part of the errand. He did not get caught up in the fact that it was a battle and all this stuff and the excitement of it. He did what he was supposed to do. He took the supplies to the keeper of the supplies, and then he goes out and he checks on his brother. Now, either way you look at this, David is being responsible to do what he was supposed to be doing. And in the case of taking care of the sheep, he was entrusted to be a shepherd. In the case of bringing the supplies, he was entrusted to take them where he was supposed to go, and he did it. So this shows a responsibility and certainly a maturity of doing what he was supposed to be doing. That's going to matter here momentarily. Okay? Verse 23. Then, as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. Now I'm going to stop there for just a moment. Now remember, there is debate on the height of Goliath. If you are, say, a 5-foot Jewish man, which I think is about the average of that time, are you deadly, dreadfully afraid of a man who's 6-foot-ish? Probably not, because think back at when they sent the spies into the land. We can't do it. We are but grasshoppers. And grasshoppers to a 6-foot, a foot difference, give it a 1.5 feet. Yeah, there's a height difference, but it's not insurmountable. But if you're 5 foot and he's 9 foot, and he looks like a giant serpent, and he looks hungry, you probably are dreadfully afraid. So this is why I lean towards the taller height. There's a number of reasons, but these are some of them. Because I don't know why the Septuagint says that. Do you know why the Septuagint says that? Oh, interesting. I've heard that too, actually. So in other words, the measurement of the cubit depends. It can be usually 18 to 24 inches, and so however you measure it, it would make a difference. That would make sense. So, I don't know. So verse 25, the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich him with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. So, there is a reward for killing Goliath. One, and it was often for kings, that they were very interested in having an allegiance to somebody who demonstrated military prowess. Well, what was one of the things they offered? The hand of his daughter. Because if you can take a mighty warrior who can take down the champion, do you want him as a part of your house, loyal to you? Yes, you do. Because what happens if he's not? Well, they might start singing songs like David kills his 10,000s and Saul his thousands. They might start doing stuff like that. You want him in your house. So this is a typical kind of a political or social alliance between families, pretty common. And the king would like to be allied with the man who was renowned hero for killing Goliath. Now, here's the one thing that I want to point out. Do you notice the word taxes in italics? That means it is not there in the original language. In fact, the Hebrew says nothing about taxes. Only that his father's house will be free in Israel. So, could it be taxes? It could be. But it would certainly exempt the recipient from mandatory service to the palace. Remember all the things that the king could take and what he was going to do. He will take your children. He will take your horses and your land and all of that kind of stuff. It would leave him at least free from that. And you probably could argue taxes as well. I'm just pointing out that it's not actually in the original language. Verse 26. And David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. So David's intrigued. Tell me again what will be done. He is intrigued. But he says specifically, the man who kills the Philistine and does what? Takes away the reproach from Israel. In other words, this man's confrontation that is putting fear in the hearts of not only the king, but all the land, is a reproach upon us because he's challenging our God, and nobody is willing to step in there and represent. It's bringing reproach upon the nation. In other words, what they're saying and the way they're looking at it is that essentially Dagon and the gods of the Philistine are mightier than the God of Israel. It is bringing reproach upon him. So he is calling them out. And you know this because of what he says next. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? When he calls him uncircumcised, this is clearly a derogatory synonym, not cinnamon. But this idea of circumcision was a sign of the covenant between Yahweh and Israel. You see it in Genesis 17. This is my covenant, which shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. That means we are people of the covenant. So, if the covenant sign was to cut off your little toe, it would have been phrased, who is this fully toed Philistine? Because what he's talking about is it's not so much the physical stature, it's the fact that you are a non-covenant person with the King of all kings, and you dare challenge him. That's what this is talking about. And so this matters. These are the language. He's not looking at it. You're challenging just us. You're defying the armies of the living God. This is that spiritual war. David is well familiar with this. Now let's go on, verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Is that true? Did David come with pride? No, David was given a job to perform, and he completed the task. Honestly, at that point, he could have handed him the clay tablet or whatever they used and said, look, buddy, I brought in the cheese. This is Eliab's presupposition. Now, why is Eliab so mad? Well, it's definitely jealousy. But what is he jealous of? Is he jealous that he was anointed? Did he really recognize that David's going to actually be the king of Israel? I don't know. But it could be also the fact that he has favor with Saul that Eliab doesn't, because he was chosen. So that is in play there. There's a number of things, but it also could be that pestering little brother thing too. We don't know. We just know he wasn't happy he was there. And then the arrogance. Everybody else, Eliab didn't step up. Eliab had 40 days to be able to say, I'll do it. He didn't do it. Now watch David's response. Verse 29. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Then he returned from him toward another and said the same thing, and these people answered him as the first ones did. Now when he says, what have I done now, what does that imply? This ain't the first time they've had this conversation. This is a normal thing. And he was just saying, is there not a reason for me to be here to say this? And so he gets the same information from all the other people. Verse 31. Now when the words of which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul. And so Saul sends for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So he's recognized him, okay, but to be an armor bearer, you did have to know how to fight. So there was something in there. So it wasn't a matter of his inability completely. It was the fact that you are young, and he's been doing this since before you were born. He's got experience on you, let alone that he's 9 feet tall. You notice he doesn't bring that up. But what David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it, and delivered it from the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. And your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine, there it is again, will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. There's that statement again. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. And Saul said, David, go, and the Lord be with you. So there is evidence at that time period that there were both lions and bear in the region. The lions were run out a long time ago. Bears were there within the last 100 years. They're not there now, apparently, but they were there within the last 100 years. But look at what he said. So in other words, you see the pattern. There was small battle, small victory. Did he back away from his job to protect the flock when the lion came? No. He grabbed it by its beard, he struck and he killed it. Same thing with the bear. Those were the training phases, if you will. And then he looks at Saul and he says, your servants killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. Why? Not because if I get a lion and I get a bear, I can handle this 9 foot tall, hairy, bad smelling, nasty breath Philistine giant. No. Huh? Yeah, all of his toes. Why? Because he's defied the armies of the living God. In other words, David knew. He knew what God had promised. He knew the covenant. You don't dare come against the armies of the living God. You stand no chance. It wasn't a matter of how big he was, how strong he was, and it wasn't even the fact of the lion and the bear and his ability to do it. God delivered me from them. He will deliver me from this Philistine. And whatever he said, it convinced Saul. Why did it convince Saul? I don't know. Was he really convinced? I don't know. Because the next part is interesting. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head. He also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. Now, there's a couple of reasons that Saul may have done this. Number one, did David come in there looking to fight? No. The interesting thing about this, though, as an armor bearer, he would have had armor of his own, and likely it would have been right there. So for some reason it wasn't. Maybe it hadn't been made yet, because who was he the armor bearer of? King Saul. They also wore armor. So they weren't walking around there, in flip-flops and board shorts. But he came to make a delivery, then he sees this opportunity. Now, the king's armor would have been very distinctive. So, if he goes out there dressed as the king, it might have misidentified him as Saul, and that might have seemed attractive to Saul. So maybe he's a sacrificial lamb. Okay, if this is what you want to do. So I don't know. It also could be that he's like, well, he has no armor and you're going to need it. Take mine. There aren't a lot of kings that say that. Let's just be honest. That's not typically how that goes. So whatever his motivation was, it could be the victory, but dressing him in the armor is kind of ironic. It's just what it is, because it's kind of foreshadowing things to come, because Jonathan's going to transfer the kingdom to David, so to speak, the royal regalia that comes later. Now, why did David say he couldn't wear these. It has nothing to do with the size. It doesn't say that. That is a common misconception in the church. What does it say? I have not tested these. In other words, every warrior, when he's going to battle, only uses the weapons that he is familiar with and the armor of which he has tested and trained and trust. The time to test out new things is not when you're facing a 9-foot tall, hairy, bad-smelling, bad breath dude that has all of his toes. That's not the time. And that is the point. This idea has permeated the church. Where does it come from? I don't exactly know, but I know where a lot of us got it from. I think this is where it came from. I'm just going to point one thing out. Let's not get our theology from VeggieTales. Let's just not. Obviously they didn't create this idea, but this is the stuff that gets put out there, and it's just not even in the text. It's nowhere near the text. And so this idea, could it be? Sure. Would it make sense that it wouldn't fit him? Absolutely. It makes sense. These things were generally custom made. So it makes sense, but that's not what it says. It's the fact that he hasn't tested these things out. What they did was just play off of the idea that's already out there. So David did what David does and what David knew. Then he took his staff in his hand and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag and in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistines. Now, here's another misconception, that this here shows just strictly the power of God. Because you are not taking down a 9-foot man with just a sling and a stone, even though it's a good song. Okay? But that is actually not true. These slings were often well used in organized warfare because of their deadly potential. You see Assyrian slingers were depicted on the different walls of the palaces at Nineveh. So they have found evidence of this stuff. They found these Assyrian sling balls, which were about the size of a human fist. And they would sling these things, and they would be accurate up to 100 yards. It was a weapon, and they said the velocity of which it hit would take down and kill a man. It would break bones even with the helmet being on it. This is not like, hey, let's go shoot squirrels. This was a serious weapon. That's another misconception in the church, where we're doing something that preaches good, but it's not actually factual. But there's a piece of irony here that often gets overlooked, and I can't help but point it out. Because there was a tribe in Israel that was known for being skilled slingers that could hurl rocks more than 100 miles per hour. You read about them in Judges chapter 20. Verse 12, it says, "Then the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, 'What is this wickedness that has occurred among you? Now therefore deliver up the men, the perverted men who are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove the evil from Israel.' But the children of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brethren and the children of Israel. Instead, the children of Benjamin gathered together from their cities to Gibeah to go to battle against the children of Israel. And from their cities at that time, the children of Benjamin numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who numbered 700 select men. Among all this people were 700 select men who were left-handed. Everyone could sling a stone at a hair's breadth and not miss." What is so significant about the tribe of Benjamin being able to sling stones? Well, let's look at 1 Chronicles chapter 12, just so you can see it again. Now these were the men who came to David at Ziklag while he was still a fugitive from Saul, the son of Kish, and they were among the mighty men, helpers in war, armed with bows, using both their right hand and left hand in slinging stones and shooting arrows with the bow. They are of Benjamin, whose brethren? Isn't it ironic that the one tribe that was known for being masters of the sling is the tribe of Benjamin, which is the tribe that Saul comes from? And where is Saul during this battle? He's hiding. Does anybody else find that ironic? I think it's hilarious. So, these things were definitely a weapon. These were not arbitrary. These were not small. These were not like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. These things were powerful. These were legitimate weapons. And you would assume at some point Saul probably used a sling. So why did he pick 5 stones? This is the great question, the great debate. It doesn't say. It could be that you should always be ready. I mean, if you're going out to a gunfight, are you taking 1 bullet? I'm not. I'm probably going to miss. And a lot of people will play this thing as that he had good faith but not perfect faith. And that could be the case. I mean, did he sound a little less confident? No, not at all when he said that. God will deliver him into my hand. He didn't seem worried at all. So I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that. If you were a slinger who from 100 yards could hit within a hair's breadth, that's pretty accurate. I would assume, because what else are you going to do with the sheep all day long? He's out there playing around, slinging rocks. That could be. I don't know. And again, is it a lack of faith to take more than 1 rock? No. That's nonsense. Again, this is super preachy stuff. Okay? That is not a lack of faith. I mean, frankly, will 1 rock take down a 9-footer? I don't know. Have you ever tried it? Neither had he. So we don't know. I mean, maybe it takes 5. He's a giant. But there's another part of this that is possible. And it's the fact that Goliath had brothers. In 2 Samuel 21 and verse 15, it says, when the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David and his servants went with him down and fought against the Philistine, and David grew faint. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, which is half the weight of Goliath's. I put that in there so you would know that. Who was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and struck the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, you shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel. David's getting a little bit older then. Now it happened afterward that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sabichai, the Hushathite, killed Saph, who was one of the sons of the giant. Again, there was a war at Gob with the Philistine, where Ahlan, the son of Jer-Oregim, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again there was a war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. This is why if you cut one off, it doesn't hurt you. 24 in number, he was also born to the giant. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan the son of Shemiah, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were born to the giant at Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servant. So because they were all born to the giant of Gath, and it identifies one of them as the brother of Goliath, then it is fair to say that they were all the brothers of Goliath. It means he had 4 brothers. 4 plus the 1 equals 5 for those of you that went to public school or from Iowa. Sorry. Is it possible that David is so confident he knew about these other ones that he's going to take out the whole family? It's possible. We don't know. It doesn't tell us. But these are all things that are at least on the table. And frankly, I like that one the best. Because it's like, yeah, dude, you go do it. Now, 6 fingers and 6 toes. This is known as polydactylism. And this wasn't completely uncommon. They had some beliefs about this. But it was, I don't know. They say it has a lot to do with the inbreeding that would go on and some of this stuff. I don't know about any of that. But there was a 7th century Assyrian text that they found. And they have rules for this. It says if a woman gives birth and the child has 6 fingers on the right hand, poverty will seize the house of the man. If, on the left hand, the mother is endowed with prosperity, the man's adversary will die. The list continues describing all the possible configuration and concludes, if a woman gives birth and the child has 6 fingers and toes on each of its right hand and left hands and right and left feet, the land will live undisturbed. So it happened frequently enough that there was something to it. I'm going to give you another theory that is out there with this, okay? I have not been able to prove it, but I've heard it from multiple sources. So as I tell you this, it is nothing but conjecture, but it is interesting. So as you guys, if you've been around here a while, you know that I have shown you where there is evidence of giants all over the world with various different people groups and tribes, including here in America. Even to the point I showed you guys a news article of bones that were found. The article was out of St. Joe. So, I mean, it wasn't uncommon. It's an old article. And I also showed you guys the quote that came from Buffalo Bill about when he met was one of the Indian tribes of name I don't remember now off the top of my head. It's on the University of Nebraska's website. It comes from his diaries, and it basically talked about how they brought in this giant leg bone. It was a human bone. It was so big they ended up not being able to carry it with them. And the Indians told them that this was a people group that used to be that it was very fierce, and that they raised their hand against the Great Spirit, and the Great Spirit became so angry with them that he sent a flood and killed them, etc. It fits the whole narrative and all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to say theory, but it's folklore is when an Indian, when they used to hold up their hands and say how, it was so they could count their fingers. Because if they had 6 fingers, they were a son of the giant. Now, what do you do with that information? Nothing, okay? I'm just telling you, this is the stuff that's out there. Is that possible? It's possible. So, let's continue on. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. Don't you like how he put that in there? It's like, oh, I hate this kid. He's too good-looking. What? We got all sorts of questions about Goliath, don't we? Anyway, the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Now, these types of pre-battle insults, and it was pretty common rhetoric that would go on. These were not empty words. He's presumably backed by the deities of his gods. He is saying that, no, come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Why? Because I curse you by his gods. That's what he does. And so this is that spiritual war. So David is going to respond in kind. David says to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds. Make sure I get all of that in there. To the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and to all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. And then all the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Now I want to stop there for a moment. What David is describing is exactly how the kingdom did battle prior to them requesting a king. So it's like they had God who went out before them, and anybody who defied the armies of the living God, as long as there wasn't sin in the camp, God went out before them, fought their battles, took care of them. Then they clamored for the king. No, we will be like everybody else, and we will have a king who will go out before us and will fight our battles. Where's that king at now? The king to come that nobody knows about yet just says the very same type of rhetoric that the leaders of the armies of Israel would have said. You come at me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And then goes on. This is almost like it's going back because through David, God is still moving. God is able to maintain his kingship because Saul has already vacated the throne as far as God is concerned. Not as far as anybody else is concerned, but as far as God is concerned. And now he's moving through the new king to set his people free. But the other part of it is, what if we looked at every spiritual battle that we have? I don't care what it is we're facing. What if we looked at cancer? What if we looked at financial problems? What if we looked at all of these things with the same thing? It says, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of the hosts, the God of the army of Israel, whom you defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And then the camp, I will give the carcasses of the camp of Philistine to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. What if we took that same attitude and we approached everything? You see, the foundation of David's boast here is a broad theological framework of the ancient world. You have the stronger, better equipped warrior who is a much more effective agent for the gods who are battling. I mean, if we were playing dodgeball and you're picking players, are you picking David or are you picking Goliath? Maybe dodgeball's a bad reference because the giant, you might get him out easy. Let's play football. Who are you picking? So it's the better equipped warrior. He's more effective. But if the gods aren't actually doing battle with one another through the human ages, the strength and weapons of the human combatants are completely irrelevant. That is why you and I do not wrestle with flesh and blood, because it doesn't matter. It's not how much you know, it's who you know. It's when you recognize who you are, all of a sudden, all these other things, doesn't matter. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Why are you scared? It's not upon you. Why did Paul says that in my weakness, he is made strong? It's the same idea. The difference between David and Saul is Saul looked at the giant and David looked to God. And he says, I don't care what's standing in front of me, God will hand you into my hand. So he's the God of the battle ranks of Israel. Verse 48, so it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. And David prevailed over the Philistine. I lost my place. But David prevailed over the Philistines with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran towards the Philistine, took his sword, and drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now, they left out that little part there in the VeggieTales version. They did not put the best part. This is the best part. Let me tell you something. If when I was in children's church, they had put this on the flannel graph, I'd have been a lot more excited about going to church. I'm just saying. You'd have had my attention. I was an adult before I realized the end of that story. When I saw that, I'm like, why do they keep these secrets from me? I don't understand. So, this is the power of it. One man led with his strength and his ability, and the other one led with God. Everybody, there is not a single person in the army of Israel who could not have done the same thing. There was only one that was willing, the one who trusts God. So, this is the best part of the story. Verse 52, now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley of Elah and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road to Sharim, even as far as Gath and Ekron. The children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistine, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. So he kept his armor. Why? I don't know. If you think Saul's was too big, how much bigger do you think Goliath's was? Now, here's the thing. It says that he took the head of the Philistine and he brought it to Jerusalem. The question is, why? Because Jerusalem is nothing yet. It doesn't matter. It is completely irrelevant. I'm going to speculate a little bit, okay? So bear with me when I say this, but I think it's at least interesting, okay? So we know that he is Goliath from Gath. We know where Jesus was crucified and buried was Golgotha. And while they do not have an exact meaning, the Hebrew word for Golgolith or Golgotha means skull. That's all it means. It means skull. This was known as the place of the skull. It is speculated that this was the place where Adam was buried. And therefore they'll say it's known for the skull of Adam. But that doesn't make sense. Because if it's Adam buried there, why are you only calling it the skull of Adam? The place of the skull. I don't know for sure, but again, I'm speculating here. Golgotha, Goliath the Gath. Those two words do not overlap. That is not necessarily anything, but it is interesting how close they are. The other part of it comes down to the whole seed war idea. In Genesis 3:15, the seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. And so you have this representative champion who confronts a serpent-like enemy, who wins for his people, cuts off the enemy's head, and he brings it to the future site where the king will ultimately rule. It kind of looks like a picture of the gospel and the fulfillment of Genesis chapter 3. It's interesting because he was crucified. He will bruise your heel, but you will crush his head. I don't know. I don't know why they call it that. Nobody actually knows why it was called the valley or the place of the skull. There's speculation on it. Like I said, that thing about Adam being buried there is one of them. But it's ironic that of all the places that David would take the head of the giant, he took it to Jerusalem, which was not even relevant at this point in Israel's history. It's not till much later when David conquers it and takes it over and it becomes the city of David. So, I don't know. A lot of speculation tonight, things to chew on. Just wanted to give you guys the information. You do with it what you want. Go back and rewatch VeggieTales. It's good for your soul. Are there any questions about tonight? Man, y'all are easy. Yeah. What? One at a time. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that exactly because it could be a little bit out of order, but I doubt it. I don't know. I mean, was Saul in his right mind at this point? I don't remember. Is this where before he kind of went crazy, or did he already go crazy? It could play into that too. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that exactly. Do you have something, Callie? What's that? I didn't read the last part. What did I skip? Did I really skip it? Sorry about that. Read it real loud so I can hear it. That's funny. I either didn't put that in the slide or I accidentally deleted the slide. Both are possible. Yeah. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David was going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, Abner, whose son is this youth? I mean, it is very possible that he didn't know. You know, you may have knew who the young man was, but not knowing. Yeah, it's very, very possible. He inquired whose son the young man is. I mean, he said his whole family is going to receive benefits. David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine. Abner took him, brought him in before Saul, and put the head of the Philistines in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. So it is very possible that he just didn't know who his father was. You know, at this point, Saul was not exactly acting very kingly and things, and so the thoroughness and who he was picking and all of that, he just may not have known. I mean, it's possible. Yeah, we know this kid. Yeah. It's possible. I mean, you know, the fact that his brothers were fighting for him, you would think somewhere along the line, you would think he would know, but it's hard to say. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe he had mad cow. I don't know. That's a good question. Isaac, remind me. I'll try to look through some commentary, see if there's anybody that knows anything about that. That's interesting. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to skip that part. I didn't realize I did. So, any other questions? Any questions I can answer? Yeah. 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 It's just really, yeah. Maybe. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I'll have to look. Paul. There's speculation that Adam was buried there. The part that doesn't make sense is why would you call it the place of the skull instead of the place of Adam? I'm speculating that near the place where Christ was crucified was where David buried the head. I'm speculating. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, maybe I didn't make that clear. I am speculating on that. We do not know for sure. It's just interesting. We see it was put in Jerusalem, buried in Jerusalem, and then the place where Christ was crucified was called the place of the skull. That's what I'm saying. Like, if Jerusalem had been a major point for Israel at that stage, maybe you would think different. But I mean, Jerusalem was not even, it wasn't even a thing yet. I don't remember how much further advanced before they actually get and take over Jerusalem, but it really wasn't a thing. So for him to go specifically there, I have not found anything that has explained why. I've looked. It's speculation on my part. I just think there's at least merit to the speculation. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it fits the Genesis 3 picture. Yeah. They say so. Yeah, they say so. Now, again, Abraham didn't leave a sign behind saying this is the spot. So they speculate that it was, and they speculate all the same. But in this case, he wasn't killed. So why is it called this? That's where I'm going off, is why is it called this? Of all the things you could call it, if it was the resting place of Adam, well, first of all, would you really venerate Adam, or would you be angry with him? I don't know. Like, maybe go either way with that. It's just weird that it'd be called that if it had to do with the fact that that was truly the area of which Adam was buried. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. That's true. If you forgot, the Garden of Eden is here in Missouri, according to the Mormon. You've been there. Yeah, I was there last summer too, and I think I told you guys the ironic, when you go to the Garden of Eden, the irony in it is they have signs everywhere as you're walking the path that says, beware of snakes. And the irony, I couldn't get past it. So, anyway. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. You talking about the burial place? Kind of. Kind of. And that might be all it is. It's just weird. Because they don't normally name it stuff like that. I mean, the Valley of Elah had to do with the trees that were in there. This place of the skull, is it because there's a cave that kind of looks like a skull? Maybe. Again, it's all speculation. I don't know. Nobody knows for sure. I know that what I'm speculating fits a prophetic picture, but that doesn't mean it's accurate. Again, so when I'm saying these things, this is speculation. Don't go on the internet and say, look what I just learned today and all of that. This is just, when I have these ideas that come to me, I share them. They're at least possible. I have no way of verifying that. I mean, the only way you'd really verify it, if you dug up Goliath's skull and that David put a tag on it saying, here lies the head of Goliath, now known as the place of the skull. I think that would be proof enough. So far, that hasn't worked out. Yeah, it's got a big old tent in there. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. That's right. So don't argue with me. I'm always right. There's a painting in my office that says that very thing. I'm always right and I'm never wrong. So, yeah. You tell him, Ethan. Anybody else? All right, let's pray. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for your word. We thank you that it is true, Lord. We thank you that we can just really dig into it and go into these deeper things and these fun parts, Lord. And have you really kept your word, Lord, for us preserved all these years. We're so thankful to you, Lord. And so we just thank you for the things that you're doing. I pray, God, that you would bless all of these people here, Lord, as we go out about our week. May we represent you and carry the kingdom everywhere we go. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you Sunday.
Hands up! Goodbye, yesterday. I'm